Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
The strike is over, but the struggle continues against the University of California and its plan to withhold diplomas from student protesters. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. A judge's order temporarily ended the academic workers' walkout on UC campuses. KPBS education reporter MG Perez has more on what that means for this week's end of school schedule.
Students at UC San Diego are on the move. It's finals week, and that means last-minute studying and the end of a quarter that has included much more than just academics.
I think that people should be expressing the right to protest and strike.
Stephen Aguirre is a freshman who came here from Bakersfield, watching the United Auto Workers Union strike unfold across the state, and right in front of him at UCSD has caused some concern.
I do know that it's been affecting a lot of the classes with like whether or not students will get their finals graded.
Students and the UC got some relief late Friday when Orange County Superior Court Judge Randall Sherman issued a temporary restraining order to stop the UAW Local 4811 and its academic workers from staying off the job. He ordered them off the picket lines and back to classrooms and research labs. While the UAW will honor the injunction and stop the strike for now, that does not mean protests will stop here on campus. Graduation is happening on Saturday, and there are plenty of people with something to say about that.
Shut it down! Shut it down! Whose university?
Before they were ordered to stop striking, Friday academic workers protested the UC San Diego administration's decision to hold the diplomas of at least 7 seniors who were arrested during last month's dismantling of the Gaza Solidarity encampment near the Geisel Library. The Students for Justice in Palestine group has announced on social media plans for a counter-event called the People's Graduation to be held Friday afternoon at a location off campus, still to be determined.
Honestly, I'm kind of disappointed because I feel like UC should be supporting their students, and they talk a lot about how they should, people should have the right of speech and all of that, but they're not following up with that.
UCSD officials continue to call the strike illegal. In a written statement, Melissa Metella, UC Associate Vice President of System-Wide Labor Relations, said in part, "We are extremely grateful for a pause in this strike so our students can complete their academic studies. The strike would have caused irreversible setbacks to students' academic achievements and may have stalled critical research projects in the final quarter." The UAW says it will end mediation talks with the UC and focus on its complaint filed with the California Public Employment Relations Board. Union officials say PERB is the only authority that should be ruling on this case. MG Perez, KPBS News.
Tonight, the clouds increase. I'll tell you why you want to be thankful that the marine layer is here for us in just a few minutes.
Today, the city of San Diego broke ground on what it says is the largest general aviation redevelopment project on the West Coast. Brownfield in Otay Mesa is just about 1.5 miles away from the southern border. The city says it wants to make the airfield more attractive for international travel and trade, as well as to streamline the immigration process. The city plans to expand the Customs and Border Office there to generate more revenue.
If you have somebody who's coming back into the United States from another country, they come here, they get their aircraft inspected, they get to buy fuel from us, and the business benefits, and we as the city benefit, because we charge not only a landing fee, but we also charge a fuel flowage fee for every gallon that is being sold.
The redevelopment project will take a total of 20 years, but the city says it will start seeing new facilities as early as 2025. The North County Transit District today made commuting to work by train a little easier. KPBS North County reporter Alexander Wynn has the details.
Commuting by train to work in Sorrento Valley has its challenges, mainly how to go from here to here.
For life sciences and technology companies, their employees need to be in person.
Today, the North County Transit District unveiled a restored last-mile coastal connection service in Sorrento Valley.
This is one of the biggest economic hubs within San Diego.
San Diego Councilmember Kent Lee represents the city of San Diego on NCTD's board. The Sorrento Valley train station is in his district. It's the third most used coaster station, according to Sandag.
There are many employees that have used the coaster connection as a way to travel, considering that they get to skip a lot of the traffic on the 5 and really get connected to some of their working corridors here.
The San Diego Metropolitan Transit System used to offer the coastal connection service, but eliminated it last year due to budgetary constraints. When MTS discontinued its last-mile connection service, it also disrupted a critical need for daily commuters. Now NCTD is restoring that service and expanding it. The service offers 5 routes connecting to Sorrento Valley, Sorrento Mesa, Carroll Canyon, Torrey Pines, as well as University City and UCSD. According to Sandag, the area is the largest employment center in San Diego with nearly 130,000 jobs. Almost 60,000 workers travel from North County.
I think this is a great opportunity to increase ridership.
Jewel Edson is the board chair for NCTD.
NCTD has expanded this service to include extra trips to support connections to and from coaster trains. Extra trips accommodate off-peak commuters, like those with a hybrid work schedule,
such as students and shift workers. NCTD expects the connector routes to serve around 30,000 riders a year. Alexander Wynn, KPBS News.
The city of San Diego wants to help local service members leaving the military find jobs with the city. They've hired a Navy chief to help. KPBS military and veterans reporter Andrew Dyer has more with the city's first veteran engagement coordinator.
Navy Reserve Chief John Osted works as an intelligence specialist in the reserves and has done so for 16 years. Now, in addition to those duties, he signed on to help the city connect with more veterans and service members.
Internally, we're looking at engagement and retention, and externally, we're looking to attract veterans to work for the city of San Diego, and then also support them in the community in any way that we can.
The new city job is partially funded by the Wounded Warrior Project, a nonprofit that assists and advocates for veterans. It's the organization's first local government-focused initiative in the country.
Their intention was to help create a position with a local government, which the city of San Diego is kind of like right in the right place, and this is the right time for this type of position to just help support veterans in the community.
In a way, he says he's got 2 jobs.
Veterans in the community kind of provide another resource for Wounded Warriors Project, and then also recruit and retain veterans to work for the city of San Diego.
Osted says he's hoping to use his Navy connections not just to help local service members and veterans, but also military spouses who often have difficulty maintaining careers while moving every few years. Wounded Warrior Project will help fund the job for 2 years, but then the city says the position is here to stay. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
Today kicked off a week of giving to help people still recovering from the January 22nd floods. San Diego County's volunteer organizations active in disaster says for the past few months they've mobilized 100 volunteers. They've mucked out mud, helped with mold suppression and more. Now they're ready to help victims return home. The money raised this week will cover the cost of furniture, appliances and more. But this week isn't just about donating money.
So one of the neat things that's happening with the VOED partners for the long-term recovery effort, they're coming in to be part of the solution to help people not only just repair and rebuild, but they're also looking at how do we rebuild resilient, rebuild green, rebuild energy efficient.
Donations can be made on the San Diego Foundation website, and if you'd like to volunteer, you can sign up on togethersandiego.org/volunteer.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, the UN Security Council for the first time endorses a ceasefire in Gaza as the U.S. continues its push for a deal. That's at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
As the November election approaches, more politicians are talking about the situation at the southern border. KPBS reporter Gustavo Solis says political rhetoric around immigration is getting more extreme.
Breaking news on the border crisis. There right now is an invasion going on in Southern California.
That is State Assembly candidate Carl DeMaio in February, describing the situation at the border. And here is El Cajon Mayor and congressional candidate Bill Wells a month later doing the same thing.
What's happening at our southern border is not just a crisis, it's an invasion.
They're not alone. Politicians, particularly Republicans, are using the word invasion more and more to describe immigration.
We are not going to let these people come in and take our city away from us and take our country away from us. It's not going to happen.
And it will likely continue to ramp up as we head into the next election. Experts say that has a big consequence.
And we've identified over 165 members of Congress in their official capacity have engaged in invasion or other replacement theory type rhetoric.
That is Zachary Mueller. He's a senior research director at America's Voice, a pro-immigration advocacy organization.
And I think that's really telling and really concerning.
Why he is so concerned is because it comes right out of white supremacy ideology.
The language of invasion is inexorably tied to this idea around the Great Replacement theory, which has inspired multiple domestic terrorist attacks over the last several years.
The Great Replacement theory is a conspiracy claiming that political elites are replacing the voter power of native-born Americans with non-white immigrants. Mueller points out that the gunman who killed 23 people in El Paso in 2019 specifically mentioned a, quote, Hispanic invasion, unquote, as motivation. Mueller says that when high-profile politicians like Donald Trump use invasion rhetoric, they introduce racist ideas to a mainstream audience.
Unfortunately and tragically, it lowers the threshold for individuals to hear that, to think there is a real invasion because our elected leaders say that there is, and then that they have hate in their heart and a gun in their hands, and they act upon that.
Wells and DeMaio did not respond to questions. Invasion rhetoric is not limited to the campaign trail. Lawmakers are increasingly adopting this language to push anti-immigrant laws. That's according to Michelle Lapointe, the legal director at the American Immigration Council.
It is unfortunately coming up in legislative debates in other parts of the country, including in states far from the U.S.-Mexico border, that are invoking this same dangerous and violent rhetoric to justify anti-immigrant measures at the state level.
In Texas, Governor Greg Abbott argued that the state was under invasion while trying to pass a law that granted local police officers and judges deportation powers. Lapointe says that a federal judge appointed by Ronald Reagan rejected the argument.
He started by looking at the natural dictionary definitions and the meaning of invade, and concluded that it means entering a country with hostile intent to assault, attack, plunder, and that it has to be by an organized, essentially military invasion.
The judge, David Ezra, acknowledged that Texas is under pressure because of the influx of migration, but said that he saw no evidence of any type of military invasion. Lapointe hopes cases like this one in Texas will shed a light on the inaccuracies of this political narrative.
This idea of an invasion, aside from being just factually inaccurate, is an incredibly dangerous way to describe the complex situation at the border and the immigration situation in cities and towns across the United States.
Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
Marijuana remains illegal federally, but in many states like California, it's accessible for recreational or medicinal use. The presumptive presidential nominees have shared mixed feelings on this issue over the years, but could its popularity change their politics? Julie Benbrook takes a closer look.
Where do voters stand on legalizing marijuana?
How many states are already legalized? It's just been sort of an absurd law.
Only about a third of U.S. voters were in favor in 2003, but 2 decades later, support went up to 70%. Now the federal government is working to keep up with public sentiment. In 2022, President Joe Biden pardoned prior federal offenses of simple marijuana possession.
Because no one should be jailed for simply using or having on their record.
Marijuana has been categorized as a Schedule I substance along with drugs like heroin for decades. But the Biden administration is trying to change that.
My administration took a major step to reclassify marijuana from a Schedule I drug to a Schedule III drug.
A Schedule III classification would make marijuana a controlled substance, the same category as prescription drugs like ketamine. During former President Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, he said that legalization should be left up to the states.
You know, I know people that are very, very sick, and for whatever reason, the marijuana really helps them. But it really helps them. But I think in terms of marijuana, and legalization, I think that should be a state issue, state by state.
But his administration rescinded a Justice Department trio of memos from the Obama administration that prevented federal prosecution of marijuana offenses in states where it's legal. This November, voters in Florida, where Trump is a resident, will decide whether recreational marijuana should be legalized in their state. There may be political benefits to supporting loosening rules on marijuana, as its popularity, particularly among younger voters, could drive people to the polls. Reporting at the White House, I'm Julia Benbrook.
For less workers in Southern California could soon go on strike. The United Food and Commercial Workers says it will hold a strike authorization vote this week. Workers say Food for Less and Kroger undermined contract negotiations and accused the company of violating workers' right to representation. They're demanding higher pay and safety improvements. Results will be announced after voting ends on Friday. Kroger issued a statement saying the company remains committed to negotiating in good faith. If you've bought groceries recently, you've likely experienced some sticker shock at checkout, but some items have really spiked in price. Jen Sullivan looks at why we're paying more for certain products.
A breakfast staple is skyrocketing in price. Orange juice. Since the beginning of this year, orange juice prices have gone up more than 30%, according to Trading Economics, a site that tracks the price of certain commodities, hitting an all-time high in May.
Prices are as high as has ever been.
Yuri Ferris with the Rainforest Alliance says the spike in prices is largely being caused by severe weather changes in Brazil. Brazil is the world's largest producer of oranges, accounting for 75% of all orange juice exports.
So it's a very tricky moment for orange juice globally.
Most of the orange farms are in Sao Paulo, Brazil, which has been impacted by severe drought. But the orange trees are also being destroyed by disease.
It's called greening, caused by the bacteria that has infested crops all over the world.
Ferris says the only way to fight the disease is to burn down the crop, and it takes at least 2 to 3 years to grow another orange tree. A lengthy process, which likely means prices aren't going down anytime soon. To compensate for the low supply and high demand, orange juice makers are using other citrus fruits to mix with oranges to create OJ.
In order to maintain consumption, you have to mix it with other products.
But it's not just oranges impacted by drought and climate change. Drought is hurting coffee and cocoa beans. It's impacting the price of chocolate and coffee. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is predicting food prices across the board will increase by 2.2% this year. For Consumer Watch, I'm Jen Sullivan.
The summer storm season is just ramping up and FEMA is running out of money. NOAA says the U.S. has already been hit with 11 extreme disasters so far this year. And combined, those cost over $25 billion. And that means that FEMA could slip into the red by the end of the summer. According to one report, the agency could have a shortfall of $1.3 billion by August. FEMA says it's working with Congress to address the funding issue, and it's taking steps to set aside a reserve to be used for initial response and recovery operations.
We're so familiar with the June gloom, and that is going to help manage to keep a little bit more comfort for many of us, though not all of us. We're talking about the marine layer staying really thick as we head through this week. Part of that is we have an offshore low pressure system that is going to work its way onshore later this week. But before we get there, the mountains and deserts are going to stay fairly warm for us. So our story heading through tonight, a lot of those clouds venturing their way back in, as we so often find. 62 the low for San Diego as we head to Oceanside, 60 degrees, and working towards Borrego Springs, lower 70s there, but the heat is on across so much of the southwest, and you can tell here just how much heat is as we work our way anywhere away from the coast. By the way, places like Las Vegas could be challenging record highs out there, so it is really going to be hot through some of those interior southwestern locations. But as you get closer to the coast, the clouds stay pretty thick for the morning hours. Hard to get rid of them into the afternoon, but we should get rid of most of them. And San Diego headed back into the upper 60s for highs. So in the city there, that's what we're talking about. But Borrego Springs, 106 for the high. The mountains, the deserts, really feeling that heat. Coastal communities, no big problems here. Stay in the 70s. Again, a pretty thick layer. We will have more clouds as we venture into Friday with more of that low pressure system coming ashore. Inland communities, you're doing pretty good here. We don't have any problems as we hold on to the 70s and 80s. Numbers varying slightly, but pretty much right in the ballpark here for the upcoming days. Mountain locations, this is where we start to see a few fluctuations. Upper 60s, then lower 70s, back down a little bit cooler for Thursday with maybe a few extra clouds out there. And as we transition then to desert communities, we're holding on to the 105 to 110 range with the exception of Thursday. That's where we get a little bit cooler. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Melissa Constanzer.
While most experts agree that shark attacks are rare, many say that rising ocean temperatures are leading sharks to hunt more. In recent days, 2 separate shark attacks injured multiple people in Florida. And just last week, a shark attacked a man in Del Mar. Laura Aguirre has more on what one marine biologist says you should not do when you enter the ocean.
What? They need to get out. Terrifying moments in the waters off the Florida Panhandle. 2 separate shark attacks in Walton County Friday. The first victim, a 45-year-old woman near a sandbar with her husband.
She received significant trauma to the midsection and pelvic area, as well as amputation of her left lower arm.
About 90 minutes later and 4 miles away, 2 teenagers were attacked, also near a sandbar.
Victim 1 received significant injuries to one upper and one lower extremity.
The second teen had minor injuries to her right foot, said the fire chief.
This time of year is when sharks will move in shallower to feed. They're looking for prey along the beaches.
Damiana Humphrey was in shallow water in May off Galveston, Texas, when a shark bit her hand.
It was my body's reaction to it that probably saved me.
That reaction was to punch the shark in the face.
The face was the only thing that came up out of the water.
It let her go. Surgeons repaired several torn tendons in her hand and her recovery continues. Most shark experts point out time of day matters.
Don't go in the water at dusk or dawn because sharks are crepuscular hunters.
And that's when we went during dusk.
Don't go in the water with jewelry. Don't go in the water with plastic water bottles because that crunching sounds like fish bones. Stay away from river mouths or murky areas.
Bottom line, attacks are rare, but always remain cautious. I'm Laura Aguirre for KPBS News.
Summer movie season is here, but with declining box office numbers, studios are turning to some unique methods to get folks back into the theaters. Lee Waldman explains.
Summer movies are struggling to make waves.
The box office is down at this point about 24% versus last year.
Memorial Day weekend, a traditional major moneymaker for the film industry, saw the lowest box office in 29 years. Last year's writers and actors strikes mean we can expect a lighter than usual slate of movies this summer, further driving fears of a theatrical meltdown.
So we need a hero right now for the box office.
That hero could come in a very strange form. Ryan Reynolds teasing the upcoming Deadpool and Wolverine by declaring the war of the popcorn buckets. Media analyst Paul Degardabedian says movie theater chains are looking for any angle to compete with streaming.
There's so many ways that movie theaters are trying to get people to come to the theater. Great food and beverage, reclining seats, great sound and vision.
Now they're enticing customers with collectible concession vessels for major releases like Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and Dune Part 2, which achieved viral infamy for its bizarre bucket design, including a lurid lampooning on SNL. That film went on to an $82.5 million opening weekend. Degardabedian says that proves all's fair in movie marketing.
That's the biggest opening weekend of the year so far for Dune 2. I think that proved that the popcorn bucket just created a conversation and built the brand even bigger.
In New York, I'm Lee Waldman.
A ride based on Disney's first Black Princess opens to the public soon. This is a preview of Tiana's Bayou Adventure in Disney World. It replaces the decades-old Splash Mountain, which first opened at Disneyland back in 1989. It was based on characters from Song of the South, which has long been criticized for its stereotypical portrayals of African Americans and a romanticized view of the antebellum South. The new ride is inspired by The Princess and the Frog, and it opens in Orlando on June 28th, but no opening date yet for California has been announced. And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. Apple announced a partnership with OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPT, and NPR's Morning Edition is discussing the deal that will bring AI features to iPhones. And KPBS Midday Edition talks with the local author of a new book called Our New World of Adult Bullies. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.